Palestine. But some of us feel from all over Britain.
Most of the people, you've had plenty of time. Most of the people living in Israel have had to go there fleeing persecution where they lived, and mainly persecution in the Middle East.
No, actually, that's not
true. They're mainly Sephardi Jews.
Some of my family members who live in Israel came from Europe.
Yes, but the majority didn't. The majority came from the Middle East.
Jacob Rees-Mogg made an interesting point the other day when he was defending Israel. He's a conservative friend of Israel, and he was debating a British Jewish Palestine supporter. And Jacob Rees-Mogg was making the point that the majority of Jews who live in Israel are not from Europe. Their origins are in the Middle East, and he used the term Sephardic, which refers to the Jews that escaped from Spain and went to North Africa. But actually, a more correct term is Mizrahi. And these two terms get intertwined sometimes. You've got Sephardic Jews from Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Mizrahi Jews from the East, like Iraqi Jews, Syrian Jews. But basically, he was referring to the Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, Jews from Arab countries and the surrounding areas. And yes, over half of the Jewish Israelis are now of that Mizrahi background. Wasn't the case in the early days. The Zionist project was very much a European Jewish project, very much a secular nationalist European Jewish project. But following the creation of the state, following the Nakba, now the majority, or over half, a plurality of Jews in Israel are from that Middle East and North African region. And Jacob Rees-Mogg was making the point as if that somehow kind of justifies what's happening in Gaza at the minute, justifies the persecution of the Palestinians. And he mentioned that they were fleeing persecution in those Arab lands, the Jews of the Arab background. And yes, it's true. Jews were expelled from these Arab countries. Jews did suffer in these Arab countries, and they left following the Nakba in 1948. But this tells us that that probably wasn't the case before the creation of the state. So the persecution in the Arab lands must have been a reaction to the creation of the state. So was that a good thing for the Jews in the Arab lands? Was this European project created by the Zionist movement in Europe, was it a good thing for the Jews in the Arab lands, these Mizrahi Jews that Jacob Rees-Mogg feels so sorry for? And they fled persecution in the Arab lands, the Middle Eastern parts of the world. There was also provocations, there were also false flag incidents to create a stampede and terrorize these Jewish people out of their native land and into the new Jewish state, because the state needed the numbers, always needed the numbers to make up the majority, to make Jewish people a majority in the land. And they are a majority within the borders of the state, depending on which borders you recognize. But of course, if the state, whether you call it Israel or Palestine, if it was from the river to the sea, they would not form a majority. That's why from the river to the sea is seen as some kind of anti-Semitic remark that wants to do away with the state of Israel. Because if you had any state, any democratic state from the river to the sea, it would no longer be majority Jewish. So how could it be a Jewish state? This seems to be the square that those at the hard end of the Zionist spectrum can't seem to circle. You can't have a Jewish state that is also a democracy, that also encompasses the whole of the land, the whole of Eretz Israel, from the river to the sea. And some want even more than that. But let's go from river to sea at the moment, because that's what the state controls. And I know Gaza is no longer occupied. There aren't settlers living there, but it's under a blockade, and at the moment, well, it's under a heavy bombardment of bombing. But ordinarily, people like to argue that, well, we pulled out of Gaza and look what happened. Well, when you pulled out of Gaza, it became locked on both sides and became an open-air prison, as David Cameron once called it. And over in the West Bank, it's not part of the state of Israel, but you have racial colonies of Israeli settlers living in that land. So from the river to the sea, you have 1 million Arabs living in Israel with Israeli citizenship, not nationality, citizenship. And you have several 100,000 Jewish settlers living in the West Bank. So everybody's living everywhere. You've got Arabs and Jews living everywhere, on top of each other, in segregated communities, in some cases. In some cases on top, literally, like in Hebron, where the settlers live above the Palestinians and they throw their rubbish down onto the Palestinians who live below them, literally and figuratively. So from the river to the sea, you have Palestinians and Israeli Jews living in the whole of the land. Israel controls all of it, control who comes in, control who goes out. So the reality really is close to a one-state solution. There is no two-state solution. We're close to a one-state situation. Why not just give everybody who lives there one man, one woman, one vote, and you can call the country whatever you wish. You want to call it Israel, call it Israel. You want to call it Palestine, call it Palestine. Israel-Palestine, and just live like that.